Welcome, one and all, to another episode of Pacific 414 episode reviews. I am your host, Mike, and in this episode, I'm going to be talking about season 2 of Seth MacFarlane's The Orville. What did I think of season 2 compared to season 1? What did I like? What did I dislike about season 2 compared to season 1? Well, the answer to those questions is there wasn't much I didn't dislike. There was more I liked than what I disliked. And one thing I want to get out of the way is, well, Clyden. Clyden's a jerk. Yeah. In season 2, we found out a lot more about the Mocklins. We actually had quite a few Bortus-centric episodes, and we found out you go to another planet and you don't meet their preferred astrological signs, and you happen to be in an astrological sign that they don't really approve of, then you're sent to a camp because your particular astrological sign has shown signs of being violent. And then we also see where Captain Mercer, well, he needs to do a better job. And when it comes to starting a new relationship, because you never know when someone from your past will show up who's actually an enemy when all this time you thought she was someone else. And what I'm referring to is Lieutenant Tyler, or Tiala. The Krill school teacher we met in the episode The Krill, when Gordon and Ed were on the Krill ship trying to get copies of the Book of Avis. Well, yeah. Turns out that when the Orville and the episode Geloja, the episode where Bortus gets to take a big long piss because it's been a year since the last one. Well, this new cartographer comes on board the Orville from one of the science stations, and everybody is liking her. Janelle Taylor, or actually no, it was Tyler, and everybody's loving her. They're saying, yeah, we love this new lieutenant. Gordon, he's smitten. He likes her, and Ed and her get into relationship. Well, long story short, what happens in the season? Well, she turns out to be a Krill, and as far as going to a piss party on Mockless, you better have a date with you, and you better make sure you wash your hands afterwards. And what else did we find out in this episode? Well, the Kalon, yeah, part Borg, part Dominion. Yeah, that's my take on the Kalon, because what ends up happening at the end of the Identity two-parter is much like Odo at the end of season 3 of DS9. Our good friend Isaac has to make a decision as far as who he's going to choose, and he ended up choosing the crew of the Orville and the Union. And of course, the Union was getting their ass kicked when the Kalon were attacking Earth, thanks to the Orville, because the Orville was taken over by the Kalon, who felt that all organic life forms should be extinguished after reading Isaac's report. And what led to them reading Isaac's report? Well, what ended up happening is Isaac ended up shutting down in sickbay, and nobody knew how to reactivate Isaac, so they made the decision to go into Kalon space, far from any Union communication array. And well, we not only find out that the Kalon executed and destroyed all their creators, but now they want to make sure that they destroy all organic life throughout the galaxy. So this episode, you pretty much knew Isaac, wasn't gonna side with his people. You saw it coming. I mean, heck, another giveaway was, you know, Isaac still had blue eyes. His people, they all had red eyes. For any of us who grew up in the 80s watching Transformers, well, red eyes were Decepticons and the blue eyes were the Autobots. And seeing that Elon Prime and everyone else had the red eyes, well, what could I say? They were the evil bots to be wary of, and Isaac, the only one with blue eyes, well, he was the only one that you could really cheer for. And you've got to give credit to the writers for, still building upon the relationship that Isaac and Claire have, and of course, Marcus and Ty, being part of that relationship too. The bond the boys developed, especially Ty with Isaac. So you've really got to like that, and of course in Geloja, we actually got an appearance from Jason Alexander as the new barkeep, and also in this season, Patrick Warburton made his on-screen appearance as forget the character's name, but he has two esophaguses, so they can really pound food. They can really pound it. That's I know that's a horrible Patrick Warburton impression, but hey, that's what I've got. It's more on the lines of a bad sliced alone too. But that's what I got. Take it or leave it. But this season had very very good episodes, and not too many episodes that I could complain about. I mean, you have tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and that you know second to last episode before the season finale. And in that episode we meet the Kelly from the past, and because of her interaction with herself in the future and the crew of the Orville in the future, what it ended up happening at the end of that episode is there was supposed to be a mind wipe, and they were supposed to be using the same schematics and time array that we, were introduced to in Old Wounds back in season 1. Well, the mind wipe not only failed, but history itself was altered. And in The Road Less Traveled, which was the season finale, we found out what would actually happen had Kelly and Ed never met, never married, never divorced, and neither one of them had ever been on board the Orville during the Kalon attack. So, that was a good alternate universe, alternate timeline story. And, like I said, there are just so many good episodes in this season. It's hard to pick just one as far as a particular favorite. I mean, you could choose Identity. I mean, that was an amazing 2-part episode of The Orville. Not only the writing and the directing and the acting in the episode, but also the scenery you got in the episode, the music that accompanied it. And, you know, speaking of the music in this season, I started picking up a little bit more Jerry Goldsmith cues in the music, and some of the James Horner cues, especially those that were very reminiscent of Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 3. So you really got a lot of those cues this season in the Orville. And, the Mocklin episodes, it was great to, get those episodes in my view, because you learned a lot more about the Mocklin species and the Mocklin culture. Yeah, it's hard to agree with, but that's just what it is. And then of course you have you know the episode, and now of course the name of it is escaping my head, but anyways, it's the episode where Claire and Isaac are starting their relationship, and you know Isaac was pretty much using it as a social experiment to find out, you know, how human relationships work. And there are a few funny parts in it. One of them being Isaac in a wife beater and underwear, and then of course an actual on-screen appearance by Norm Macdonald as Yaphet. So that was funny. I mean, you could still see that Claire and just really detest Yaphet, and Yaphet's still trying to impress her, especially after Isaac dumped her. But you know that's what it is. But it was a really that was a really good episode. You know, with Claire and Isaac, and that relationship, and of course, getting back to you know the birthday cake episode. The episode where the Orville and the crew of the Orville, I should say, they make first contact. They meet the species, who find out that Kelly and Bortus share the same birthday. It happens to fall in a month that is frowned upon amongst the species. And what do the crew of the Orville have to do in order to free their crewmen after they're taken to a camp? And there are tensions on both sides because of what's going on. Well, our good friend John comes up with an idea, with the help of Isaac, to create an artificial star, which will help free not only Wardis and Kelly, but everyone else who is considered a Giliac. That's the astrological sign in this culture's, you know, astrology. And, you know, they managed to do it. And, Tiala, who actually is the new security officer on the Orville partway during season 2, she says, what's going to happen when they find out all of this was fake? And both Kelly and Ed surmise that hopefully by the time it happens, they'll have long forgotten their interaction with the Orville. So I know everybody's probably wondering, okay, Mike, there's an episode that you haven't mentioned yet, and you haven't mentioned that many, but what did you think of the episode Home, which saw the departure of Alara, Halston Sage? Well, I thought that was a great episode. And again, like I said in the beginning, there were a lot of great episodes. There's very little I didn't like. There's more that I did like. And Home was one of those good episodes. Again, you had Molly Hagan and Robert Picardo, from Deep Space Nine and Voyager, respectively. And you also had John Billingsley, who was Dr. Flux on Enterprise in this episode. So, to my knowledge, this is the first time any two actors who have a Star Trek connection and were chief medical officers on a respective Star Trek show, with Robert Picardo playing the doctor, the emergency medical hologram, and John Billingsley playing Dr. Flux. As far as I know, this is the first time they've been on screen together, or any actor who's been a chief medical officer on a Star Trek series has been on screen with someone else who's been a chief medical officer on board a station, a starship in the Star Trek franchise. But of course, the Orville, pays homage to Star Trek, and also adds a little bit of comedy because, this is from Seth MacFarlane, and he's, paying as much respect as, he wants to Star Trek, but also trying to establish the Orville, its own canon per se. And that's what's great about this show, is that yes, it will pay homage to Star Trek and several other science fiction, and just any series or movie that's in pop culture, but it's also trying to establish its own footing. And I think it's done that quite well in this season. Quite well with, all the episodes, 12, 13 episodes or were this season. And, it was also great to see F. Murray Abraham show up during the season. He was Ruffalo and Star Trek Nemesis. You had Ted Danson show up as one of the newest admirals in this season. So, that was great. And I do apologize for not naming every single character's name. You know, Sometimes when you do these things live, you may have the name right before you go live, but as soon as you go live, that information just clicks off. And yeah, I could have written down, but I just didn't. You know, the whole point of doing anything on this channel, especially when it's live, is for it to be natural, for it to be real, for it to be unscripted, unrehearsed. I might plan a few things out, as far as when I'm going to do it, especially this Thursday for the box score after the Cubs Pirates game. I do have something planned. I've only told one other person about it, but in general, everything that you see when I go live, or even if I've recorded it, it's all unscripted. And I know some people would rather see something that goes by a script, but I just rather give you my thoughts after viewing an episode. Even if I've viewed an episode 2, 3 times, 4 times, I'd rather give you my thoughts right then and there instead of, writing it down after the first viewing. And then, maybe later on in the day, I watch it again and my views and thoughts change on the episode. I mean, I'd rather give you what my true thoughts are instead of some scripted thoughts, but that's just me. But all in all, I really enjoyed season 2 of The Orville. I'm looking forward to season 3. I am definitely looking forward to the third season of The Orville. Excuse me as I take a drink of water. But I'm really looking forward to this third season, and I think it's going to be a fantastic season. Yeah, it's going to be the first season produced by Disney, so we'll see what kind of restraints they've put on Seth MacFarlane and the creative team behind the Orville as far as what they can and cannot do. Hopefully, nothing has changed. Hopefully, they're going to let Seth do his thing and, let the Orville itself improve. And, hopefully when we finally see the third season, it's going to be well worth the wait because remember, there's been COVID and, productions started, it stopped, started again, stopped again. So, this season has been delayed. It was supposed to come out at the end of last year. And, you know, now they're saying possibly at the end of this year. We'll see about that, but I am definitely looking forward to season 3 of The Orville. I think it's going to be, much improved over the first and second season, just in my opinion. I think, whatever foundations were laid these past 2 seasons are going to be built upon, you know, the lore of the Orville universe is going to be built upon, of course. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Seth MacFarlane knows where he wants to take the series, and he's got a good team behind him helping him do that. And it doesn't hurt that some of those people are veterans of various Star Trek spin-offs. So they know how to, write technobabble, if you will. And trust me, there is technobabble in this series, just like there was on Next Generation, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if any of the actors on the Orville are just like the actors from Star Trek, And when it comes to technobabble, that's just something they go, "Oh gosh, here we go, technobabble." But it's just a great series. I really enjoyed the series a lot. It's just really hard to just pick one episode outside of Identity that is really a standout episode of the season. Not because any of the episodes were bad; they weren't. They're all good, and it's just difficult for me to, say, okay, this is my number one episode for the season. It's not this episode, it's not that episode, it's this episode. But that's just me. You could feel differently, and that's fine. You can, you know, look at the Orville and say, "Well, I wish they had done this. I wish they had done that." You know, I wish they had, cut down even more on the comedy. The comedy this season, it was cut down compared to the first season, but it was still there. It still made its presence, and it brought a smile to my face. I'm sure it's brought a smile to many people's face, and that's what you want. You want this show to continue to prosper in any way, shape, or form, and I think it's doing it quite well. So that's really all I've got to say about it. It's an enjoyable show. This was an enjoyable season. You know, just because Zor coming in as you know Tiara, I, I'm butchering the name, but she's Lieutenant Tiara, and you know she took a little time to grow on me per se, but that was very good. But I do want to touch up, and maybe this is my favorite episode of the season now that I think about it, especially if I'm going to mention this point. But get back to the episode Home, where Halston Sage left the show. Lieutenant Alara went back home and to Slab, and you had Robert Picardo and Molly Hagan. You know, the scene in that episode where it's Alara and her father, and Robert Picardo and Halston Sage are playing off each other in that scene, and Alara's saying, "All I ever wanted was for you to say, good job, and how proud of you know you I am." That was a really good scene between those two actors. I really enjoy that. So I guess if I had to choose my favorite episode of the season, even though it was, you know, a sad one with Halston Sage leaving the show, I'd have to say Home was my favorite episode. But, in The Road Less Taken, the season finale, it was cool to see Alara come back, even if it was an alternate universe, but they still played on the fact that Earth's gravity had played an effect on her, and she was still suffering the repercussions of it. So that was pretty cool, and you know maybe we'll get an appearance sometime in the future. I hope so. I'd love to see her come back, even if it's for one episode. I would love to see her come back. So, I guess if I really think about it, Home was my favorite episode of the season, aside from Identity. The Identity two-parter. Home was the other favorite of mine. And that's pretty much what I have to say about season 2 of The Orville. I know it wasn't as long as my season 1 video, but I did think to myself, maybe I should shorten this video up a little bit compared to my season 1 review. This way I don't bore you all to death. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you all for tuning in. Really appreciate it. I hope you like what you heard. If you have anything you want to add, leave it in the comments section. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to share this video, go right on ahead. And if you want to subscribe to the Pacific414 YouTube channel, I would greatly appreciate that. And you can also follow me on social media. I will bring it up here in just a second. You can follow me on Twitter at Pacific414. You can also follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Pacific414. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Pacific_414. And you can also find me on Discord at Pacific414 number 4343. And I will be right back. It will be on Thursday here on the Pacific414 YouTube channel. It'll also be on the Pacific414 Twitch channel, and it will also be on my personal Facebook page Thursday, the season premiere of my Chicago Cubs recap series, the box score, after the conclusion of the 2021 season opener between the Cubs and the Pirates, where I will give you my reaction recap to that game. So we'll see what happens. As far as we know right now, Kyle Hendricks will be taking the mound for the Cubs. We do not know who the starter is going to be for the Pirates, but the 2021 season will soon be upon us. Today is the last day of spring training, and we will see what happens throughout the course of the Cubs season. And on that episode, I will give you my thoughts on who I think will, make it to the playoffs and also win the World Series. So until then, this has been Mike for Pacific414 episode review. I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in live. If you didn't tune in live and you watched this on, the YouTube channel afterwards, thank you very much. And I wish you a good Sunday, and I will see you all later.